out to Socrates. Socrates still trying to get the opening. Oh, Socrates! Whoa!
And there it is. The crazy gang have beaten the Culture Club.
Maggie Thatcher, can you hear me? Maggie Thatcher, your boys took a hell of a beating. Your boys took a hell of a beating.
Welcome to our latest module of Your Boys Took a Hell of a Beating. This one is I don't know. They're all special modules. This one, but this is the Football League versus the rest of the world, 1987 module, and we've got two co-pilots today. One of whom was present at this game at Wembley, August the 8th, 1987. First, I will introduce Chris Lepkowski. Chris, welcome.
Hello, that wasn't me. I was not there. I do remember watching this, so I think it was on ITV. In fact, it was on ITV.
Yes.
For a long time, I had a VHS of this game, and I remember it did have adverts on it, and it was a... I think we're going to remember it a bit more fondly than probably many people do, but yeah, it was a great game.
It was something very, 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 very different, and for the man who was there, our correspondent on the ground, the Kate Adie of the module, Stu Horsfield. You were there. You have seen the great Diego Maradona, Michel Platini, Reben Elkiar, to name just a smattering of John McClelland.
Now we're starting to get to the names. Yeah, I was waiting for you to get to the big ones.
Stu. I remember we tripped over this topic of conversation at one point, and everyone who was involved in that podcast just kind of like, it was a jaw drop moment. You were there?
Yeah, at the time it was massive, as in for me personally going to that game, and then sort of in the midst of time you just kind of forget because it wasn't competitive. You kind of forgot that you went, or it didn't seem relevant, and it was never brought up. And I think we got to it by the fact that Mercantile Credit would sponsor everything in the mid to late 80s, especially where ITV were concerned. They seemed to have fingers in a lot of sporting pies. And I remembered the front of the programme. I got a programme while I was there as well, and I was like, I think they sponsored the 87 Football League versus Rest of the World fixture. I've got the programme, I was there. And then from there it was like, what? And yeah, it was spectacular in terms of the names that were there. And then obviously, I'm sure as we get into it, it felt a little bit like a war zone as soon as Maradona stepped out onto the hallowed turf, shall we say.
Absolutely. And this was a game, it took place, and because of this, it was taking place because it was the opening salvo of the centenary season of the Football League. And we'll come to the I don't know, less than adequate organisational skills of the man in charge of this, who we will reveal later on. But you know, I think I've mentioned before, he also had a sideline in selling fish fingers to impressionable mothers with hungry children throughout the 1970s and 1980s. As a club chairman, there is very much a Captain Bird's eye element of play, with electric fences thrown in for good measure. But we'll come on to that later on. But the reason for this game was, yes, it was the 1987-88 season. It was to, obviously for Liverpool to be absolutely magnetically beautiful. But that's for another podcast, for another module. This was the open salvo of the centenary season of the Football League. And the Charity Shield had been played the week before to make way for it. So this is actually a week before the season starts. And, we've got Bobby Robson in one corner coaching the rest of the Football League. And Terry Venables drafted in to be the coach of the rest of the world. If anything, players are tripping over themselves around the world to take part in this game, to play at Wembley, to be part of this event. Stu, less so Football League-based players in many respects. It seems a strange juxtaposition.
This was my first trip to the old Wembley. And the old Wembley was such a disappointment. I can't tell you how. By the time I got there in '87, it was on its knees in terms of as a stadium. The amount of cup finals and England internationals that I'd watched there, and it was, as a kid, you're desperate to go and watch a game there and desperate to just be there. And that was part of the excitement of going to this game as a kid, was that it was going to be my first time at Wembley. But like you just said there, though, this sort of rest of the world side, you can imagine there being a bit of a clamour because of it's at Wembley, it's England, it's the Centenary of the Football League. I'm not saying it meant more to players from abroad, but it probably meant more to players from abroad than it did to players in the Football League. Certainly, the Football League clubs. You look at Liverpool and Everton, and their sort of reticence to provide players for this fixture. And you look at, I think Peter Shilton starts off in goal, which, okay, that's fair enough. At the time he was England's number one goalkeeper, but then Steve Ogrizovic is the next best, and surely there's got to be a couple of goalkeepers somewhere in between there. I mean, this is way pre 1992. And the foreign influx of players, I'm sure we'll come to the two players that play in the Football League that aren't from Great Britain or the UK. So, there were a lot of goalkeepers to choose from before you went from Peter Shilton via Steve Ogrizovic. And I think that probably sums up the seriousness with which it was taken in terms of players. I mean, you look at the front three. I'm not sure how the rest of the world lined up. I think they just lined up however they wanted. But in theory, if you look at the front three that started for the rest of the world, I think the rest of the world side took it a lot more seriously, and I think felt the gravitas, or assumed the gravitas of the occasion and the fixture probably far more than players in the Football League, certainly managers of English League clubs and Scottish League clubs, probably chairman of English and Scottish League clubs as well. I feel like they were probably a little bit more sceptical. Like you say, with it coming a week before the start of the season as well, I think the lads from abroad probably felt the sort of what they would feel almost the regality of this occasion far more than the British-based players.
Yeah, the Serie A at this point in time, Serie A and La Liga would often start early September. The British leagues would start 2, maybe even 3 weeks before they did over there. So yeah, it's very much a case of pre-season still for a lot of these players. France, interestingly, had already kick-started. Glenn Hoddle and Mark Hateley not involved. Monaco players now, they have busy schedules. They're playing for Monaco that weekend, so they can't be involved from a rest of the world perspective now. But yeah, interesting to run through the two teams. It's Peter Shilton, Richard Gough, who's, I think he's on the cusp of actually leaving the Football League to go and sign for Rangers.
Yeah.
Kenny Sanson, John McClelland, Paul McGrath, Liam Brady, who has returned. He's playing for West Ham at this point in time, not long having signed for them. It's Brian Robson, Neil Webb, who are playing for this is a pre-England capped Neil Webb. He would have go on to play with Robson at Manchester United. Clive Allen, Peter Beardsley, the only Liverpool player involved, kind of tapped up to play in this while he was still a Newcastle player. Chris Waddle, substitutes as mentioned, Steve Ogrizovic, FA Cup winning goalkeeper 1987. But Alan Smith, Steve Clarke, the current Scotland manager. A decent right back, but maybe not the cream of the Football League. Ozzy Ardiles, Pat Nevin, and Norman Whiteside. For the visitors, Dassiev, Yosimar, Celso, Julio Alberto, Glenn Hussein, Bagney, Berthold, Gary Lineker, Michel Platini, a retired Michel Platini, Diego Maradona, Paulo Futre, and from the bench, Zubizarreta, Larson, Belanov, Datari, Elkiar, Zavarov, and Stoichkov. Definitely, Chris, an imbalance of enthusiasm, I'd say, here in the two teams.
It looks it, doesn't it? I mean, it's weird because I was thinking back to this at the time, bear in mind I was only 11, so I was heading towards my 12th birthday at this point. I remember being really excited by this because when I came into football, the high sub ban had already kicked in a couple of years earlier. So once we had that season before Mexico World Cup, and then Mexico World Cup came, and I just remember being absolutely enthralled by everything that happened in Mexico. It's just brilliant. And so when this game came along and we got wind of some of the players, and back then we had a teletext TV, so I was getting all of this information every day on page 140 on our TV and CFAX on 302. So they kept dropping names who might be playing, and I remember being quite excited by it, and it really kind of dampens it now with hindsight that I hear that people are a bit like meh about it. I'm like, what? This was brilliant. It was a curtain raiser. It was great. But when you go through those squads, especially the Football League squad, it does go to show really how can you put it? How kind of it just felt like they picked or tried to pick as many of the informed players from the previous season, with little thought given to who might be left out or whatever. And even people like Steve Clark and Steve Grizovic, who were very good campaigners for their clubs. I mean, Steve Clark went on to play about 400 games for Chelsea, or Grizovic, incredible servant for Coventry, but it probably wasn't going to get you through the turnstiles at Wembley to hear those names mentioned. And of course, you mentioned the uncapped Neil Webb at the time, and John McClelland, who would go on to be a star of this game, who would have been relatively unknown for even casual fans turning up, I suspect, a decent defender for Watford. So it was more of an intriguing clash, I think is the best way of putting it now, looking back. I just remember, unlike Stu, I hadn't yet been to Wembley. I would go 5 years later. Trust me, it looked even worse in 1993 when I went to 1987. I just wanted to be there because all my favourite players were playing in this match. Robson, Maradona, Platini. I was hoping Boniek might turn up. He never did. Futre, who I was reading about in World Soccer and in Match, who, brilliant player, fantastic. He's going to be playing. Hussein, the centre-half, who I remember United being linked with at the time, and he ended up joining Liverpool. And Dasayev, we were told he was the best goalkeeper in the world. Dasayev, fantastic. Let's see him. So there was this real intrigue for my young self, who had been denied European continental football by the Heysel ban. And this felt like a real treat, if I can call it that, at the time. The fact it was going to be live on TV, it was a glorious summer's day. It felt brilliant. And I'm sticking with that.
And so you should, Chris.
Yeah, you stick with that.
And Stu, Chris comes up with some very valid points there. I mean, this is just a year on from the World Cup. We've all been bewitched by the Mexico World Cup in '86. A little bit of starvation in that, even when kind of like BBC and ITV were only chipping into some games for the second half. Yeah. We had to sit through Wogan and Emmerdale Farm to get to kind of like Uruguay versus whoever, which was just utter lunacy. So yeah, so many of these names still fresh in the mind. I think ITV at this point are still using Aztec Fever as the theme tune to most of their football coverage as well. So we were still kind of like in that glow of Mexico. So yeah, these names are absolutely bewitching, and this is the reason why certainly for those of us watching on television, not for those in the ground. Those who were tuning in on television were certainly tuning in to see a case of another glimpse of those that we love watching at the World Cup. On the opposite side of that, it also has that wonderful kind of escape to victory element to it. There's kind of like Maradona, there's Platini, there's Belanoff and Elkiar, and there's John McClelland. It's like Kevin O'Callaghan, John Walker, and Russell Osman. Ipswich Town must have been kind of like holed up somewhere close to the filming for a pre-season friendly when all that took place. And
that's where Ozzy Ardiles comes in, because obviously he's been there before. He's been there, seen it, and done it. Yeah, the name. And this was the thing. Obviously, Josimar. I mean, we know the 2 goals that he scored at at Mexico '86. So when he was going to be playing, everyone's expecting him that he's going to be shooting from 30 yards on site. While Chris was talking, so I was 14 for this game, and like I say, it was my first trip to Wembley. I don't even know how it came about. My dad didn't do a lot that was any use to anyone, to be fair. But to be fair to him, he pulled a blinder with this. This was probably his greatest gift to me. And I was playing for an under 14 side where he lived at the time, and we were a decent side, and we were a close set of lads. And again, looking back, as I seem to do with a lot of things I'm talking about my dad, I feel like now, just sat here, there was probably a lot in it for him, because there was 6 dads and 6 sons went. Now, I know that we were left on our own in the hotel on the Saturday night. That I do remember. So part of there is a strong, now, looking back, a naivety then, but now probably a dawning realisation that clearly this was a trip for dads under the guise of these young lads can go and watch some world-class footballers and learn a bit, while the dads, they could have gone anywhere. God knows where they went. I genuinely don't know where they went. But yeah, but the thing was, it was that. I remember us chatting on the way down about who we were going to watch and who we were going to see and how they were going to play, and what games we'd seen them in before. And I mean, the obvious ones, as Chris has already mentioned, Platini and Maradona. And Maradona's he's probably not in pre-season. He's probably still post-season title-winning celebrations, but he's probably, certainly in '86, he is at, as we all know, the very peak of his powers. Lineker is top scorer at the '86 World Cup, and he's at Barcelona. Platini and those iconic games from '82 and '86 World Cups, and 3 Ballon d'Ors, and it's almost like it just couldn't get any better with some of these names. And like Chris said, at the time, there was, when you read newspaper reports, there's apathy as to the timing and all those sorts of things. But as a kid, as an early teen, it was like, oh my God, they're all on the pitch together. And it was that. Never mind that Brian Robson, for me, I thought Brian Robson was a great player, but he was almost part of the support cast for who I was going to go watch and who I was interested in. And yet, he's the England captain and sort of the things that I've grown up with Brian Robson doing. And yet, it's he's part of the supporting cast of what is really the peak of world football in the '80s, which, again, as we know, is in our sweet spot. It's these icons from 2 World Cups are all of a sudden tipping up at Wembley all together in the same team, and I'm going to be there and watch it live.
Fantastic, yeah. I mean, definitely, yeah. It's definitely got that element of, we see these players that are playing part for the Football League week in, week out. Either in person clicking through turnstiles, or they're there on Match of the Day, or a live game on a Sunday afternoon, and all that type of stuff. I can remember feeling quite gypped that Gary Lineker was involved for the rest of the world. I just felt it was a space used up for someone else who could have been. We could have had Koreka instead. It was that type of vibe. I remember seeing that and thinking, I feel cheated by that. But within that, there were a few players, Chris, that Venables wanted to bring in that he was denied as well. On top of all this, and one of them I would have felt gypped by. He wanted Terry Butcher to play, who was playing for Rangers by now. He was suspended for Rangers that weekend. Rangers were playing. He was suspended, so he wasn't available to play for Rangers. So Venables, by rights, to say, well, he can't play for Rangers. Come and play at Wembley in this exhibition match. To which Graham Souness said, no, it's not happening. But then you also had Arrigo Sacchi turning down a request for Ruud Gullit and Marco van Basten, who reputedly, as the rest of the players who were involved in that, really fancied being involved in it.
It's really interesting, because if Butcher had played, would Glenn Hussein have played? And if Glenn Hussein hadn't played, would he have piqued the interest of some of the English clubs who were interested in him at the time? Probably, because I don't think anyone took much notice of this game. But he certainly came onto the radar for all of us watching at the stadium or watching at home. At this point, And it's interesting, you mentioned Van Basten and Hullet, because at this point, they're just names that don't mean anything. I'm watching this through the optics of Mexico 86 still. So people who didn't play Mexico 86, I'm very curious about. I'm kind of thinking, well, Van Basten, yeah, I've heard of him, but he might not be very good because he didn't play in the World Cup. Ruud Hullet is another one. And we don't get to see these two absolute genius players until a year later in West Germany during the European Championship. So it was a really curious mix, and I'm so glad that Butcher didn't play. But then you think, well, if Hullet can you imagine a team with Hullet and Van Basten rubbing shoulders with Platini, Maradona, Futre? You got Josimar larraping down the wing, ready for him to shoot. It's just brilliant. And it wasn't on my radar at the time that we missed Hullet and Van Basten. But when we talk about it now, you think, wow, yeah, can you imagine if they'd been involved? That would have been just fantastic. What I do notice, there's a real Soviet element to this, an Eastern European, a few of the players from behind what we called then the Iron Curtain have come in, and dare I be cynical and suggest that they're maybe trying to catch the eye of people in the West and maybe trying to make better careers for themselves. Back in the day when things were still when there was still a little bit of intrigue, shall we say, about what lay behind the Iron Curtain, I got to see it a year later in Poland when I went and we travelled through East Germany. So I'm not going to digress beyond that too much, but it was very clear that what went on over there was very different to the kind of Western culture that we were used to in the UK, and a lot of the westernised footballers in this squad would have been very used to.
Really good shouts there. I mean, there's a gradual softening of the Iron Curtain, Stu, at play at this point. The first kind of, intimations towards it, Euro 88 would be that kind of, that watershed, I think. But yeah, this is I think that, the kudos of being invited to this event was clearly meant a lot to clubs and various football federations around the world for them to say, yeah, we want our players involved in this match.
Yeah, look, propaganda's propaganda, isn't it? It doesn't matter how you dress it up. And I would imagine certainly that clubs. I mean, Chris mentioned Dasev, at the beginning, who was reputedly, probably was probably the best goalkeeper in the world. Maybe Neville Southall as well had a claim to that, but yeah, Dasev, and here he is chosen as when you're a goalkeeper, there is only one goalkeeper. It's like being a fullback or a defender or a midfielder or a striker. But when you're the goalkeeper, it's just you, and to have that kudos of being the number one starter in the rest of the world, it's massive. And for an Eastern European club side, to have that. Probably people now, certainly younger than us, will look back at it and probably can't really relate to how that would be with regards to how football is now. And, the Champions League, and certainly, the Iron Curtain no longer exists. But back then it was, as you say, it was a glimpse, and Chris rightly says it was a glimpse that we got in European competition that we weren't actually accessing anymore because we weren't in Europe anymore. And I know it's funny because I remember finding the programme probably only about 5 or 6 years ago, and I remember finding it, and I didn't realise that at the time, and since, that Stoichkov played. Now, Stoichkov comes to the fore in the 90 World Cup, so a little bit like Hullet and Van Basten. So at the time, Stoichkov was just a name that I wasn't overly interested. I assumed he would be decent, but looking back now, I probably rank him alongside the chance that I watched him live alongside Maradona, Platini, Lineker, Robson. I bracket Stoichkov in that particular bracket, and Elkiar as well. But at the time, not really much of a clue, and I didn't realise, like I say, until I looked back at the programme and looked back at the list of names and was like, oh my God, Dragan Stojkovic played in that game. I watched him play too, and so there were players who, like Chris said, maybe we were denied seeing, but we probably didn't know what they were going to go on to, but there was players we did see that we didn't realise what they were going to go on to, and certainly I bracket Stoichkov as one of those. But yeah, strong Eastern European connection. But like we say, propaganda's propaganda, isn't it? It's anything to promote yourselves, your club, your players, and certainly back there, like Chris said, about engineering moves to Western clubs, it was still relatively difficult to get a move unless you're coming towards the end of your career, so it was a chance to sort of get out from behind the Iron Curtain, get to Wembley, play at Wembley Stadium, play alongside Maradona, Platini and these players. And, it must have been felt like an incredible opportunity for those players.
Absolutely, and I'm sure the recompense of the money being flashed around by the Football League in some directions, at least, with regards to this afternoon at Wembley in August 1987, played a big part in that, and no more so than Diego Maradona on a reputed £90,000 for his afternoon's work. The more, shall we say, hate-filled tabloids of a certain brand were lambasting him for £1,000 a minute, as this being the case for him. Not everyone was in it for the money. The rest of the world players were said to be on 5k a man. Michel Platini seemed surprised that he was being paid at all. Because he thought, just for the honour of it, he was happy enough to be involved. Very big difference between Platini the player and Platini the footballing politician.
Just about to say that, yeah.
Yeah, that was one that kind of, like, when I was reading through some of the archive articles and the build-up to this game, took me, shall we say, by surprise, Stu.
Yeah, the Platini thing is great. The irony, again, hindsight's brilliant, isn't it? How you can look and be like, I can just imagine it with this Gallic shrug and I'll play for free and and all of that. But then all of a sudden, sort of fast forward 30 odd years, and it's like, where's the money? Where's the envelopes? Where's the cash? Where's the? And now he's probably kicking himself that he only got 5,000 for the game, etc. as well. It's the Maradona thing, isn't it? I don't know. I don't know. It's a strange one. It's not strange in that that's what Maradona asked for, and that's what he gave, because he was clearly the best player. And like we talk about ticket sales, he was the name. Even if it was just to go and boo him, he was the name that had to be at that game and play in that game. But the obvious disparity between 90 and 5, and these players probably don't need £5,000 badly, but I don't know, it just doesn't seem to. I don't know, it just doesn't seem to sit right. Maybe pay all of them a little bit more and Maradona a little bit less, or just donate match fees to charities, but whatever it is. But to have that massive 85,000 disparity between one player and everyone else doesn't really sit right. And I think it's great that Platini just thought that it was an honour. And I'm sure he genuinely believed it at the time. I didn't realise it was his only time he ever played at Wembley. I never knew that at the time either. And I get that if he's retired, all of a sudden that chance to finally play at Wembley Stadium, and I genuinely believe he probably would have done it for free at the time, knowing that he'd retired, knowing that when he did retire at the time, he thought he would never play there, and then all of a sudden here's this opportunity. Yeah, he probably would have done it for free.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, he would be the star performer for the rest of the world in this game.
He was. I mean, considering he supposedly retired, he was Michel Platini, wasn't he? As we remembered him, as we loved him, strolling around the pitch, kind of socks rolled down, looking like he was completely dominating the game. I think at the time, if I'm right, he was only 31, which was an unusually young age for anyone to retire. You only retire when you're 31 if you've got a major injury or something untoward happened. So it was a shock that, I think to many, that he felt that he could no longer offer football something as a footballer and opted to quit the game. So to have him back and to see him playing so beautifully that day, and there were a few players who really stood out, and I'm sure we're going to go through them, but Platini was one who just slipped back in as if he'd trained for the game. You know, we know that he wouldn't have done, but he fitted in so comfortably. And going back to what Stu said, really about Maradona, I don't think you could have had this match without Diego Maradona, because he was Mexico '86. You know, no matter all the little stories that you get off shooting off from that tournament, you know, from an England point of view, you know, Gary Lineker emerging, Brian Robson's shoulder popping out, Ray Wilkins, the brilliant game between France and Brazil, West Germany being there or thereabouts. We all think of one thing, and we think of Maradona being held aloft on that pitch in Mexico City with the tournament, with the trophy at the end of the tournament. So this game, probably, I don't know how many people came to Wembley to see Maradona, even if it was just to heckle him. But I'd imagine he put a lot of people through those turnstiles that day, because he was just the be-all and end-all in football at this very point.
And come they did, Stu, to boo. And
they did as well.
And didn't they just? Interesting stories that kind of like there were plans for kind of like the two teams to walk out the tunnel with corresponding players hand in hand, arm in arm, and then kind of like the tannoy announcer kind of like made it up on the hoof and had them all come out, Noah's Ark 2 by 2, so they could all be kind of like applauded or booed, at various velocities.
I'll tell you two things. One, as good as Platini was on the TV, Platini was stunning that game. I went fully expecting it to be a Maradona show. Platini was incredible. It is my abiding memory of that game, is Platini's performance and his range of passing. He made it look like the easiest game in the world. Like I say, I watched it back for this podcast, and he was incredible that day. He was absolutely incredible. And the TV doesn't do his performance anywhere near justice in terms of he never had anyone near him all game. And it was I remember it was the strangest thing to see, in his ability to hold space and find space, but it was his range of passing. But yeah, he was incredible. Maradona, when he came out, running with the ball, and I remember him, he was throwing it up and then just pushing it with his hands as if goading the crowd. And no word of a lie, that is how he ran from that tunnel across the dog track onto the pitch, and he ran and just pushed the ball with his hands as if mimicking the hand of God, and the crowd went nuts. And it just didn't bother him, just chest out. And on he went, and that was how he ran onto the pitch, just like literally just punching the ball in the air with his hands as he ran on. I mean, I thought it was brilliant. I didn't really get into the booing thing. I was just too busy. It was one of those games where I just sat forward, right on the front of my seat, sort of fingers clasped, and that was it. And I didn't move. I was taking as much in as I could. But yeah, the crowd went mental. The people behind, all around you, the fellas around were, the names and the language that I picked up as a 14-year-old that day absolutely widened my vocabulary beyond belief. But yeah, that was how he came out.
I think that's just like the biggest takeaway I think you could possibly take from the day, really. I mean, it's just got that great element of the pantomime villain. Yeah, the bad guys are actually on the terraces rather than pitch.
They couldn't cope with it, and that was the thing. And it was because that was the thing that struck me. It was like the men, the fans, they were just almost incandescent with rage at what he'd done, and I was like, "It's so friendly." It's like he's about to be the best player in the world, and you could see the sheer frustration and anger at what he was doing. But yeah, I thought it was genius. Absolutely. He's gone up even more in my admiration, if that was even possible. I mean, Chris, this is just a wonderful display of shithousery in that respect.
It is. Do you know one of the biggest cheers of the afternoon is there's a moment where Maradona's sort of peeling away, and Brian Robson comes and takes the ball off him with a brilliant challenge, really, really super tackle. And it gets a cheer like a goal. That was the response. It was like, up yours, Diego, from the fans. And of course, all that does is stokes the narrative that had Robson been fit last year, things might have been different. Notwithstanding the fact that Diego Maradona was just the best player in the world for a good reason. And one England player wasn't going to change that. But it was brilliant to see. And I'm very much in your school, Steve, and by the same of it with you as well, Stu, that this was the first year I went abroad that I remember going abroad. I'd been as a baby Poland, but I went to Greece this year with my parents in 1987. And I remember we were visiting somewhere and we had to go past a school. And all you could hear were these little Greek kids in the playground, Maradona, 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 Maradona. That's all you heard. Maradona was football. And so to see this guy paraded around Wembley, pissing off all the people that you want to see pissed off, all the Neanderthals who have swapped travelling with England to maybe cause a little bit of trouble with Johnny Foreigner, being utterly enraged by this little bloke from Argentina. And meanwhile, I wish we'd seen Peter Shilton's reaction when he was doing that with a ball going out of the tunnel. I wish we'd seen it.
I mean, Stu, if only Maradona...
And I do wish Terry Butcher had played for that very one reason.
I'm noticing that Peter Reid wasn't in this team as well for the Football League. I mean, that would have been good. He beat him twice in the hand of God. He could have beat him 3 or 4 times on the open expanses of Wembley. Stu, what's great about this as well is that for the whole kind of week building up to it, it was very much a will he, won't he take part with Maradona. He wasn't. He wasn't confirming anything, but it wasn't that he was particularly being mellifluous. He was just still partying from Napoli's 86, 87 Scudetto. Along he eventually comes, but it's great. There's this like tabloid war between, particularly, the one I won't mention in the Mirror, and it's great looking on the back page of the Daily Mirror on the day of the game, and it's kind of like, we told you so that he was playing. And they put a little kind of like, black and white image in the corner of their rival saying he's not playing and he's a shit house and all this type of stuff. So there's this goading all week. He's not going to play. He's absolute disgrace. He's a global disgrace because he's not going to play and he's disrespecting the Football League. And then he shows up and he's still a disgrace because he's shown up and he's taken £90,000.
And that's it. It's like they can't live with him and they can't live without him. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like box office, like television. It's like a film. It's, like you said, I'm pretty sure, and you can just imagine, it's one of these, I think the last podcast we did, Stephen, all these imaginary conversations, the Tottenham Coventry game, all the imaginary conversation that's gone on. And you can imagine this imaginary conversation with Terry Venables as this wide Cockney manager, like, well, is he coming or isn't he coming? Like Sunday League, well, is he coming or what? Is he turning up or what? Where is he? Who's got his number? And you can imagine Venables sort of speaking like this, and they're all going, I don't know, Gaffer. He said he was, but we don't know if he is. Ozzy, get Ozzy on the phone. Is he coming or what? Is he? And you can just imagine. And genuinely, I don't even think it was, like you said, I don't think it was part of the contract and part of the £90,000 as to. He probably didn't know himself. He probably didn't know where he was till about Thursday afternoon. But it's like I say, it's just the imagined conversations that must have gone on with Venables. Like, well, do I bring someone else in? What are we doing here? And the press, as much as like you say, they want to fall out with him and they want all this jingoistic but they needed him. They needed him to sell papers. The Football League needed him to get fans in. The fans needed him because they needed to vent at somebody because of 86. It was like everybody needed him. Probably even the rest of the world and the Football League. That was, as much as played at Wembley, I would argue that either played against or on the same team as Maradona. It's the sort of story, no matter who you are and how good you are, that you want to be able to tell your kids that, that you did that. Everybody needed Diego Maradona to be there. And with all the best will in the world, I'm sure he genuinely wanted to all along, but just didn't really know what he was doing until Thursday night, probably. And I would imagine that Aussie dealers had all on, trying to get him, trying to interpret for Terry Venables and just try and double check if he was coming or not. But yeah, it's look, tabloids. They fall out with each other like siblings, don't they? I mean, they're always falling out with each other over something. And like I say, Maradona was the sort of the. He was the only story really going into this game. Everyone, even Platini, everybody else is a supporting cast here. You know, Maradona is the story. It's just he's just not the most reliable of guys.
Do you know? Do you know? It's really interesting. I watched the Robbo documentary a while ago, Brian Robson, and they bring this match up. I mean, we've kind of said how much it was dismissed by people, but they mention this game in this documentary, and they rightly point out they show that tackle by Robson, and they rightly point out that it was Manchester United who won that game because that's how the scoring went. But we can't dismiss this match as an exhibition. I think the Football League lads put a lot of stock into this game, really did, and especially to get one over our mate Diego.
Oh, Stu, it even strikes that Maradona himself needed this game just to kind of blow the cobwebs away from the summer of excess.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's funny because I remember watching the game and thinking, like I said, Platini was the one who drew as the game went on. Platini was the one who sort of drew the eye, but Maradona, when you watch it back, he takes a while to get into the game. And then he plays in fits and starts. And when I was watching it just recently, it reminded me of, when you have when a dad joins in a kid's game and he's probably not fit enough to play, but because he's probably so much better than most 10-year-olds, when the ball is at his feet and he's facing the right way, obviously he looks far better than anyone else on the pitch. And that was how Maradona appeared in that game. You could see the genius, you could see what he could do, and you could see that he was, his touch and everything, his head and shoulders, even the brain, his head and shoulders. The amount of passes that he makes that are the right pass, and the rest just aren't on his wavelength. Now, granted, they don't train together, they don't play for the same team and stuff, but what he was capable of doing, I'm not sure that some of the other players had ever played with players that were capable of that. And so therefore, he tended to look, there was a lot of what looked like misplaced passes when actually they are exactly the right pass. But unfortunately, he's so far in advance of everyone else that they look like poor passes. But yeah, he's certainly blowing. There's a close up after about 20 minutes, and he's blowing. And there was not a lot of tracking back. The recovery runs were not there at that juncture of the season.
That is where the similarities between Diego Maradona's playing career and my playing career kind of coincide. There were a fair few Sunday mornings when that kind of was that description did match my type of performances. There was no backtracking. There was a loose pass here and there, yet there was some vision of play. Yeah.
Ball at your feet, facing the right way. You can look great. It's when the game's at 360 degrees. Oh, you've just lost possession, it becomes a nightmare. Yeah.
Oh, there's another half the pitch, is there? Yeah. That type of thing.
Yeah, well, it's all this space outside the centre circle doing. Why have we even got all this extra grass?
It's totally needless. Chris, I mean, to be fair to Bobby Robson as well, and the Football League do win this game, and as you mentioned before, Manchester United actually win it. I mean, it's not exactly West Ham winning the World Cup in '66, and I wouldn't swap it for the '87-'88 league title that we go on to win. But Bobby Robson, there's chaos. It's not just about Maradona in the realms of chaos leading up to this game. The Football League approach to it is chaos, and we'll come to off the pitch in a little bit. But Bobby Robson was kind of roped in to be the manager for the Football League in this one. He was given stipulations that he could only pick players from one player from each team. A bit of an intriguing, way to roll it to him.
Yeah. It was a very strange one, wasn't it? Because it kind of restricts you quite heavily as to what you can do. And I mean, he wanted to, we're only a few months down the line from Everton winning the title for the final time, as it would happen before that team gets broken up. And Kevin Ratcliffe's one of the main players of that team. And he, by rights, he should probably be in this team. Neville Southall should probably be in this team. He's injured. So that goes by the by. If you look at the core of the team, it feels like Robson's using it as a little bit of an exhibition for certain players, like Liam Brady, Ozzy Ardiles is on the bench, but also as maybe a bit as a Labrat run for people like Neil Webb, who was emerging as a very talented footballer at the time. He wouldn't be capped for a few more weeks. I think he was the 1,000th player to be capped by England about a month later in Dusseldorf when he came off the bench for England in West Germany. So he's still growing his reputation. But it does feel a team very much put together by the clubs that are willing to cooperate. And, Clive Allen, I'm fairly sure Clive Allen went to France as well. Not long after this game, possibly the year after. So we're getting that comparison that we've all been talking about, and as football fans at the time, who's better, Gary Lineker or Clive Allen? Because Gary Lineker, we've known, has been the Golden Boot winner at the World Cup in Mexico. He's had a brilliant career with Leicester, 1 year at Everton. He's gone to Barcelona. But hang on, because this guy, Clive Allen, has come into Tottenham, come into the Tottenham team of 86-87 and scored 49 goals. And he can't get into the England team, or certainly can't get past Lineker. So I think there was a little bit of testing things by Bobby Robson, even if he didn't make it intentional. I think the narrative was very much, well, let's see what this Clive Allen's all about. Let's see what this Neil Webb's all about. And you've got other players like Ardiles, you've got players like Liam Brady returning from Italy, playing for West Ham. And then you've got people like McClelland, Clark, Ogrizovic, and you kind of feel, and I noticed that Cyril Regis, who was at Coventry, was also initially in that squad. I don't know why he didn't play or why he didn't feature. Presumably he wasn't fit. But it sort of feeds the narrative that some clubs, some players were a little bit more interested than others, shall we say.
Stu, going back to the Bobby Robson issues there, I mean, to turn around to and say you can't pick any more than one player from any one given team, and then just rip that up later on when you've already told players that, because Kevin Ratcliffe, for instance, that Chris mentions, he was eager to play, he fancied playing in this game, but Bobby Robson instead thought, well, if I'm picking someone from Everton, I want Neville Southall. Neville Southall get injured. He's already not back Kevin Ratcliffe, so rather than kind of like go to Ratcliffe and say, actually, you're reprieved, he asked for Kevin Sheedy. Sheedy gets injured, and then it's kind of like, just don't answer next time he rings. So that's Goodison. Anfield, it's kind of like, well, Peter Bealesley's already said yes while being a Newcastle player. You can have him, but he counts as a Liverpool player, and you don't have one Liverpool player because that's all you asked for. You don't have another. Again, don't answer the phone. It's going to be Bobby. So this is where you end up getting kind of like multiple Manchester United players being involved, multiple Tottenham players being involved, and all of that type of stuff. But yeah, utter chaos in terms of what the role into the two coaches involved is what I find utterly fascinating in the build-up to this game, because on the opposite side of that, over in Terry Venables' dressing room, given the money that's been thrown around for the players, it goes without saying that they did not supply the basics. These world-class players tip up, these icons of the game, and there isn't even the basics of kind of like drinks, medical supplies, basic medical supplies, a change of shirts for half time. It's a hot day out there. Change your shirt at half time. So we've only given one shirt. Some of them aren't even numbered. They're not even catered for by the organising committee. The allotted physio for the day is David Butler, and he ended up going out to the nearest pharmacy in Wembley He dipped into his own pocket for plasters, bandages, liniments to the tune of about 80 quid. The match doctor was largely unobtainable because he was schmoozing in the banquet suite. They had no kit man. No, Venables and Butler had to lay out the kits at the same time as giving the pre-match team talk. A team talk that had to be done in 4 different languages. They had to get in 4 different interpreters. You can, again, we're talking in terms of, wouldn't it be great to be a fly on the wall in that conversation or that situation? There's another one, Stu.
You want this to go, or I do anyway, you want this to go one of 2 ways. Actually, that's a lie. There are only 2 ways it can go that make it interesting. One is where it is perfection and it is done to within an inch of its life, and you look at it and think, you know what, that looks incredible. So my point of reference would be the 2012 Olympics opening ceremony. I remember at the beginning of that thinking, Danny Boyle, please do not make us look like fools. And then when it finished, I was like, oh, you've absolutely nailed that. And that to me was perfect. So in this scenario, you either want it to be like that, so the whole event, the showpiece is incredible, or you want it to be an absolute catalogue of errors where you cannot. So it becomes so farcical.
You want it to be
smash hits. More and more.
You want it to be a smash hits, don't you?
Oh yeah,
you want Sam
Fox. Paul Winners party.
Sam Fox and Mick Fleetwood doing the Brit Awards.
You see, that's it, isn't it? That's how you want your revenge. You either want them to be perfection and live in the memory, or you want them to be, I can't believe that's even true, I can't believe that happened, and the more farcical it gets, the better. So you start to get to the stage where, okay, we only got 1 set of shirts, right? Okay, look, it's the rest of the world, we're going to need a lot of interpreters, right? Okay, yeah, we get that. Then it's like these imaginary copies, right? Who's got the first aid bag? Now we do this for college fixtures. We give the responsibility to a student. I'm not going to lie, we do leave our first aid bag probably 50% of the time at college because it's a student responsibility. But here you are with the best players in the world and someone's gone, who's got the first aid bag, and they've all looked at each other and gone, yeah, I didn't bring it, I ain't got it, or it's at home, or I knew we needed something. And someone's just gone, I'll go, don't worry about it. So they've sort of found the door at Wembley, gone out into the street, bought a first aid bag off the shelf, filled it up with, they've probably just filled it up with stuff like a supermarket sweep with Dale Winton, and they've just scooped what they think they're going to need that'll possibly fit in this first aid bag, and then run back and gone, and not really know what they've bought. It's probably one of them where they've tipped out and gone, what do we get?
What a throw in there as well is they've bed back to the stadium, not even convinced they're going to get back in.
Yeah,
because security's going to kind of like say aye.
Yeah, as if you're the physio and you've gone to get the first aid stuff. But yeah, they've probably owned it and gone, why have we got like Bonjela and tunes in here as well? Or why have we got a Kodak 35mm film and
who are the condoms for?
I just imagine they've just looked at it and gone, oh, okay, yeah, we'll make do, no problem, that's fine. But it's one of those where either you don't want to dig too deep because you're frightened of what you find, or you want to dig really deep and find every single problem that they must have hit upon that day, because you were like you said, they've got the best players. They are the best players in the world, and they haven't even got, like I say, a first aid kit. We do that at college. More often than not, we'll sometimes turn up and have forgotten the first aid kit. But I'm not taking Platinium Maradona to Huddersfield College. I'm not. So we can get away with it. But yeah, I love, like I said, I love that part of this game and that story. It won't be for everyone, and some people might be upset that we embarrassed ourselves or whatever it is. But nah, you've just got to see it for what it is.
You've got to embrace that. Yeah. It's definitely, I know, vibes of Carry On Football League versus rest of the world.
Yeah. We had Carry On Up the Jungle, didn't we, on the last episode? This is
absolutely we did.
Carry On Abroad. We named them all last time. Yeah.
I mean, this is very much kind of like, Sid James in the role of Terry Venables, Bernard Breslow as the kit man.
I feel like is it Carry On at Your Convenience, where they work in the toilet factory and they all Like, this is that one.
if anyone is nailed on to be the schmoozing doctor of the stadium, it's Charles Hawtrey. He's definitely kind of like knocking around with the big wigs of the FA, where he's kind of like he's meant to be patching someone up.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Utterly brilliant. Yeah, I mean, it what a shame it wasn't an era with cameras on the wall in the dressing room, because that would have been absolutely beautiful.
It would.
Oh, I mean, Chris, to his credit, yeah, Maradona, he after the game, he refuses to lambast the treatment that he got from the terraces at Wembley. He turns his attention to kind of like the journalists, basically. The gutter headlines. In the build up, one of the headlines was "Horrible Argy drops out" when another dirty Diego quits on us. Properly stoking the blue collar animosity.
Yeah.
This is kind of like it's you can't even say that the UK's changed.
No, you're at the height of the tabloid wars. I mean, these media wars are fought in a different way these days with social media and the way people consume their news. But in 1987, the media are really dredging up the swamp in every possible way, in the worst possible way. And as we were to see with the Sun, apologies for name checking them, but as we were to see with that particular newspaper a couple of years later, there were no boundaries in some respects, and Jago was a fair hit for them in their view. He'd done this horrendous thing in Mexico of knocking England out by cheating, and he was going to be public enemy number one. I can guarantee that if Maradona hadn't played, they would have turned towards Michel Platini, or they would have turned on somebody else, somebody who was a target, somebody who would have stoked up that jingoistic nonsense that we came to almost accept as the norm back then. It's unfortunate. I mean, we've had a laugh and a joke about all of this, and it's been quite funny, but the treatment of Maradona for what essentially was a moment that he got away with it. The referee didn't spot it, and that's on the referee, and it just felt like Maradona was put out there really to. I mean, obviously he was earning good money, but the tabloids were out to get him, and I'm glad he turned on him. I am glad he turned on him, and I think he should have turned on the idiots booing him as well, because you go. As a football fan, you want to go and see the great players. You go to a football match like this with no affinity whatsoever, because you don't support the Football League. You support England or Scotland or Wales or whoever. You support your team during the season. So this was an exhibition, and for him to get this, it was understandable, but it's just such a parochial, narrow view that seemed to hit football back then. But like you say, Steve, have we moved on that much? Probably not. It's just how it's delivered is different across different platforms these days. But that kind of venom, that kind of ridicule, that hostility, and it's like, it's football. Let's all calm down a little bit. But of course, those kind of voices are often drowned out by all the hysteria and the tub thumping from those who are trying to stir up hatred and venom.
Absolutely. And it's all, the veneer as well, Stu, is always fascinating in these circumstances. We're looking at a product there, an afternoon where, there's Diego Maradona, the greatest contemporary player, in world football, in August 1987. There's no arguments about it whatsoever. There's Platini, the man that can, I don't know, there's only really kind of like Cruyff, possibly, Eusebio. There's a certain small handful of European, players that you can throw up there as being, potentially the greatest player in the world at any given time. Wembley, that concept of us all watching Wembley on the TV and thinking, what a brilliant place that is, what a fantastic, wonderful place it is, until you actually click through the turnstiles and smell the wee. And all of that associated grimness about the reality of actually being in Wembley. There's a great one on the Welcome to Wrexham series in which kind of like Ryan Reynolds and Ryan McElhenney are kind of like going around the studios because they're recording, they're filming something. They're going up to all the kind of like the shiny plaques and stuff like that on various stores, and he said it's all the facade, it's all the veneer, it's plastic. It looks like it's solid metal, it's solid gold, and it's kind of like it's plastic. He said absolutely everything like that. It's what you view it as to what it actually is so far apart. And that's what you've got with this, all that chaos that's involved, and it's worth saying that the man in charge of all this is, as hinted earlier on, with the Captain Birdseye references and the electric fences. Ken Bates is the chairman of the Centenary Committee for the 1987-88 celebrations for the Football League.
Before you throw this to Stuart, who plays Ken Bates in a Carry On film?
Bernard Cribbins. Yeah. There's a couple of things here. Just following on from what Chris said as well about Maradona. I think Maradona was incredibly intelligent in his social and cultural awareness and his place in it. I think he was an incredibly intelligent, and I think he knew what was coming his way, and he knew that it would be stoked up by the press and the tabloids. I mean, he was playing in Italy at the time, and and everything that goes on, the Italian press and their north-south divide that they perpetuate in Italian club football. Maradona knew, and I also think, and I suppose this really comes to your point, Stephen, Maradona was also incredibly aware of how out of touch the officials and the administrators of the game were in relation to the players and playing situations. I read an article about him sort of leading a delegation of players about kickoff times in Mexico '86, and the demands that were being made on players and the heat when they were playing, to FIFA, and how the administrators and Havelange, it was just dismissed, and I think Maradona was actually incredibly intelligent and aware in and around the game of football and its place in society. And then you come to Ken Bates, as if to highlight all of that. Here you have somebody who deemed it appropriate to have, electric fences and all the misdemeanors and all his self-assumption that he was right for football, or that he was the right person to oversee this, and that you can't imagine. And being a chairman of a football club is one thing, but you're there because either business, or how to look after a product, or how to run an organization or streamline it. You don't have a footballing background. You don't know what it's like to play international football. You don't know what it's like to be, well, probably Ken Bates does, to be fair, on the receiving end of abuse from the terraces and tabloids and, all of these things. And all the carry-onness that we've come to talk about, and that becomes evident about this game and this day, and going on this whole centenary celebration as it sort of turns out. Unfortunately, for those who know and remember the game in the 80s, when you say, well, Ken Bates was sort of overseeing this, there'll be a lot of people listening just go, right, yeah. And all of a sudden, the previous hour that we've been chatting, they'll go, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Now it all totally makes sense.
Yeah, it's almost like we've spent an hour, and if we'd just gone, so there was this game and Ken Bates was in charge, we could have cut out the last hour.
And you could have done the dot themselves.
They could have just filled in all the blanks themselves. So yeah, I have real issues with people need to stay in their lane in life in general. I think there's a lot of things I am not very good at, have no knowledge of, and I'm not an expert in, and I don't ever pull into those lanes at any point in my life. I just stay in the ones that I know. But for some reason, some people can't help themselves and need to drive across all 5 lanes of the freeway, thinking that they can just run the entire road. And I think Ken Bates is one of those people. And like you say, here you are, 100-year celebration, and he's the man who's put in charge of it.
He's the heavy load. He's that great big huge tube going down the M1.
Yeah.
That's covering kind of like 2.5 lanes.
You're trying to guess which lane he's going to,
get past.
do I overtake him because I just want to get past him, or do I just drive way back because I don't know what he's going to do? Yeah.
Chris, beyond all this, though, I mean, here we are, we've got 64 nations sat watching this, 1 billion viewers. Pele is tipped up as the guest of honour. We've got the best player in the world on the pitch. We've got the greatest retired player in the world on the pitch. Everything going for it. How did the rest of the world not actually put the ball in the back of the net? It's Peter Shilton, for God's sake.
It's Peter Shilton's greatest ever, yeah.
With a bit of Steve Agrizovic thrown in for good measure. How do this litany of gods not manage to put the ball past either of these two?
They've been cobbled together. They've been thrown together. They've never tried. They've never played together. I was actually surprised to see Stoichkov on the bench. I had no idea about that. And Larson as well, which surprised me. So, these are A-listers thrown together with a few players from elsewhere, players who have shone during the immediate 2 years leading up to this. And I think what you have with the Football League, and maybe there's an element, and I think we kind of mocked it as earlier that Man United sort of took it seriously by, Brian Robson, Norman Whiteside, Paul McGrath playing a part in this. I think there's a big element of certain players wanted to take this seriously. Certain players were probably somewhat, and it goes back to the Heiselband, somewhat miffed that their opportunity to play continental football, to play against the best players in Europe, had been withdrawn and was no longer available. And I think there was an element of the whole Diego Maradona thing. We've got the best guy here. He's done us once already. I'm not saying Steve Clarke or John McClelland or the non-English players might have thought this, but I certainly think the influential English players would have been a little bit miffed that this guy, genius that he is rocking up on our patch and we're going to put him in his place. And I think the Football League players, obviously some of them were teammates, whether it be international teammates or club teammates, and I think that synergy and cohesion came to the fore. We mentioned John McClelland, who had an outstanding game. Neil Webb, who had a brilliant game. I remember in the game, in one passage of play, he kind of takes control of the ball in his own box, a crowded box. He brings it under control and he kind of rolls the ball back and sweeps it past his standing leg and then goes off on a run and plays the ball across. A bit of skill that only Brian Clough and Bobby Robson at that point probably would have indulged. Certain English managers would have kicked him up the street for trying something like that. So it was a bit of a showcase for footballers, for the Football League players as well. It was a bit of I probably said the word lab rats earlier, or the words lab rats. Maybe I'm doing them a disservice. Maybe some players regarded this as a shop window and wanted to show just how good they were. And I think the Football League players obviously had that opportunity. And with the rest of the world's players, dare I say, for them, this game was a chance to play at Wembley, but maybe not a huge amount more because they were involved in European competitions. And all of them were seasoned internationals. And dare I say, if your manager's needing 4 interpreters to get his message across before the game, then things might get lost in translation as well. So there were all those factors, I think, that came into effect in this game.
You Stu, 3-0 winners in the end of the Football League. As Chris mentioned earlier on, Manchester United base players grabbed the glory here. 2 goals for Brian Robson, 1 for Norman Whiteside from the bench. Chris mentioned Cyril Regis, who was meant to be involved in this. He had a groin strain. Wasn't he even missed the Charity Shield 7 days earlier, so he was out of this one. But yeah, this is a game in which you've got the players involved with the Football League. It's that sense of pride. You can't possibly go out there and lose this game. They are that little bit closer, the vast majority of them, to competitive football. The new season starting a week later. And, I think the result is kind of understandable in many respects. but your main memories of that day and that game.
How disappointed I was in Wembley Stadium is a massive one. How just not devastated, but being like, I can't believe it. And the problem with that is whenever you see it, or whenever I saw it from there on in on the TV, it was never quite, they say don't meet your heroes, maybe don't go to the old Wembley either. So there was that. There was, like Chris said, it was that week, knowing you go into that game, those rumours all of a sudden became massive as to who was going and who wasn't going. I can remember at school, it was just like, oh my God, so-and-so's going to be there. Or they've said so-and-so's playing. And, I remember being excited in the build. In fact, we weren't at school, actually. It was through the football teams that we did it. And it was the build-up of who was going to be there and who wasn't. My overriding memory is how good a footballer Michel Platini was. That was it. He, to me, I knew he was good and all of those things. I fully was going at one, thinking Gary Lineker would score goals and that Maradona would be Maradona. But as the game went on, Platini just, like I say, it was one of those performances that and it is a friendly, it's an exhibition game, but his just natural talent and how easy he made the game look. That was my overriding memory was his performance as a player live, and obviously the two best players arguably at the time were there, but he was the best player I've seen play live in terms of making the game look easy. He was incredible, and that was my overriding memory was just how good a footballer he actually was.
Fantastic stuff. I mean, Chris, are you jealous much that Stu managed to be there and also resist the temptation to boo?
Totally. I don't think I would have booed, but I would love to have been there. Like I say, I went to Wembley in '93 for the first time, and it was a stark moment to just see what the stadium was like by then. It was pretty bad, but there was something about it. There was a pomp and ceremony about the old Wembley, the 39 steps, that raw box that just seemed to be the centrepiece of the bowl inside the ground. It was a shithole, but it was our shithole, and it kind of felt a little bit more charming than, although it had its grey bits, its rusty bits, it was falling down, the toilets were dreadful, the terracing with the bolted on seats was awful. But it felt like it was part of football, and I'm not a big fan of this particular Wembley that we have now. So in answer to your question, yeah, I'm completely envious that Stu went, and I'm completely on board with his decision to not boo the great Diego at the time.
Totally. We're proud of you, Stu, for that.
I remember him laughing. I remember laughing when he came out doing it, thinking, oof. And laughing at the rage that and it was real rage. And I mean, if people could have stood any further forward, they would have done. They were almost like everything was extended out of them.
Moving on to our "and finally" section, I much enjoyed that "and finally" section. It's just become, the football chat has become kind of like secondary to kind of like what was on TV that night, and what we're recording off the charts. On the TV, Stu, I mean, you were rattling around that hotel. All the
God knows what the dads were doing.
Me and you, Chris, we'd been sat watching whatever's on TV at home. I mean, just as a point of interest, grandstand while ITV was showing the football, they had cricket, the third day of the final test match between England and Pakistan at the Oval. At 4:10, there was rallying, the British Midland Ulster Rally. Karting, the British Kart Grand Prix, and racing for Haydock, just scattered all over the place. Beyond that, after the football on ITV, we had champion blockbusters at 5:15. Past winners brought for a battle royale, followed by Q Gary. This was which was one of those like horrendous kind of celebrity kind of game show challenge programs. which were just kind of like 10 a penny at that point in time. The Kate and Ted Robbins Show, Five Alive, more quick fire sketches, Family Fortunes with the Tarbuck, etc. Summertime Special, Jim Davidson, It Gets Even Worse. And then you've got Bullman After the News. BBC One, they're giving us The Crankies electronic comic. More knockabout comedy with the kiddies' favourites, Ian and Jimmy, including another episode of The Adventures of Jimmy Bergamack, Magic from the Great Soprendo, and music from Nick Cayman. Now that is an eclectic mix of entertainment on BBC One there. Worryingly, it's Rolf Harris's cartoon time at 6:05. Back to the Carry On films, it's Carry On Cowboy at 6:30. Seaside Special at 8:00. Val Doonican hoists himself out of the old rocking chair to host tonight's offering from Jersey. Also on the bill are Benny King, Mike Burton, Charlie Days, the Witchwoods, and Puppets, Pepe and Friends, plus Mike Smith with his new version of the old Beat the Clock game. There is a drama called Bluebell, but thankfully there's a bit of violence on Miami Vice later on. BBC Two, they will give you, let's have a look, we've got more cricket from 4:40. Come Home Julie, Tug of Love, story of a couple whose foster child was snatched and taken to Ghana. Discovering Portuguese, introduction to the language and the people. We've got Dennis O'Neill, favourite songs and arias from the Welsh tenor, guests including the soprano Elizabeth Gale and also Corey Bond. Beyond that, we've got Citizen Kane, the 1941 movie, and Blood from the Mummy's Tomb, 1971. Channel 4, beyond the obvious Brookside omnibus, we've got Right to Reply. We've got International Athletics, third day of the European Junior Championships from Birmingham. All Muck and Magic, new ways of using compost and how to look after your lawn.
You're making these up. Get off. No way.
We've got one for you here, Chris, on your Polish side. Nights and Days, the final episode of the Polish family saga, followed by Saint Elsewhere and James Brown in concert. Stu, anything in particular there that you will be utilising in the hotel room?
I think look, you can't go wrong with Carry On films. I am fully aware of their absolute incorrectness and awful prejudices, but oh my God, they were funny. Certainly to a 14-year-old, they were just absolute genius. Nick Cayman and the Great Soprendo all on the same programme at the same time. In hindsight, that would probably have been worth a watch.
That's worth a venture to YouTube to see if that's right.
Yeah, that's quite the watch. And then I don't mind James Brown. Got a little bit of time.
Good James Brown.
Brown at the end. Yeah, if we were allowed, I'll say we're allowed to stay up late. The dads wouldn't have been back by then, so yeah, probably we'd have watched
you can
James
make it
Brown.
as you go along that night, Steve.
Yeah, you name it, we could have watched it.
Chris, beyond the Polish drama, is there anything in particular you'd be making a beeline for there?
Well, the compost. You admit the compost.
that would be good. That would be.
I thought was brilliant. But I mean, after the Brookside omnibus, I'll probably have a good sleep until Miami Vice comes on. I hope it's one of the better episodes. You know, what a disparate choice of programs. I would have been too young to go to the pub at this age. I honestly don't know what we would have watched. We had a video, but I'm sure we would have watched something and be absolutely overjoyed by whatever was on, but there's nothing there that stands out. Jim Davidson, Rolf Harris. Oh, God, no.
Oh, it does make grim viewing even by 1987.
It sounded more like something from the late 70s when you were reading it out, but to think it was... To think it was the year of the late 80s, it just makes it even worse. Oh dear!
Peak Saturday night entertainment there for you. Okay, we can't be bothered watching what's on TV. We're being driven to the cinema instead. Chris, I sent you the box office listings for August 1987. What are you going to go and watch at the brand new multiplex down the road?
Well. I mean, I was a bit of a James Bond fan, so The Living Daylights is in there, you know, that I've noticed that I might go and watch. Beverly Hills Cop 2, One film that I'd be absolutely avoiding, Dirty Dancing. Good grief. No, thank you. I'm just scrolling down. Here we go. Number 37, Rita, Sue and Bob 2. I am all over that. Definitely watching that with George Costigan, of course, playing the lead role. I mean, what a classic film. Having a gangbang against a wall with black lace. You cannot get... This film was the brains behind the bawdy British romp that we get told about. A typical, if you could think of a typical bawdy British romp, it would be Rita, Sue and Bob 2, and I'm all for it.
It absolutely would. It was very much kind of like essential viewing for high school students at that point in time. Stu, anything from the cinema if you're sneaking out from the hotel?
Well, part of me, as part of this mismanagement of this game, part of me wants the night before Venables to have taken the team to watch Rita, Sue and Bob 2 at the cinema, and all those sophisticated Europeans and multilinguists are there watching, not understanding a single word of that film. Yeah, for me, I did go to the pictures to see The Living Daylights. I'm not sure about where Timothy Dalton ranks as James Bond. He's low down the pecking order for me.
Yeah.
A film that I did notice was in that I did come to appreciate and probably got it out from Blockbusters is Dragnet. I thought it was a great film with Dan Aykroyd and Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
And the Virgin Connie Swales. It is such a great film. Great comedy, great film. So yeah, although I wouldn't have at the time, it was one of those where you sort of, it's almost becomes, it's sort of, you do it by word of mouth. It's one of those films that are word of mouth. You know, if you see this, you watch this on video, and I think it's very much an underrated Tom Hanks classic.
Absolutely. I'll throw in Roxanne there, Steve Martin, the fireman with the ludicrously long nose.
Yeah.
It is an eclectic mix there of movies, but yeah, there's a little bit of everything, shall we say? The following day, it's the top 40. As mentioned previously, we can scratch below the 40 if we're struggling for tunes. The day after, the Football League defeat the rest of the world 3-0 at Wembley. What are we illegally recording from the top 40? Stu, I'll give you first shout on this.
Now, this is a far better chart than, like I say, the one we encountered on the opening day of the season in our previous podcast. New Order with True Faith was number 4. You know, we don't have to look too far down the charts before we find a decent classic. As I went down this, and I am going to admit to one that is really tragic, but I'll save it for, I don't want to be judged on it, but I feel like I'm going to be judged on it. This is the start of the Stock Aitken Waterman era, is what I'm noticing.
Isn't it just?
Yeah, this is where it really starts to seep in. I think 87 is sort of the watershed where they all start to seep in. So my next choice, I've got 3 choices here. My next choice is Wishing Well from Terence Trent D'Arby. I liked him. I thought he was a good singer. I mean, obviously, there's only the one album. I don't know what happened to him, and I'm sure he's had a great career in the music industry. But for a time, I thought it was decent, and I think it's a great song. My embarrassing enjoyment is a certain Mr. Bruce Willis releasing Under the Boardwalk, which I really like the song anyway, but if you do listen to it, he's actually a lot better than you think he's going to be. And for that reason, what program that's for, but for that reason, I'm going to have to say that Bruce Willis Under the Boardwalk would be the 3rd song on that list that I would be recording.
Oh, so Stu's gone for a guilty pleasure there for his third choice there. Chris, can you out-cool him, having thrown in a curveball like Bruce Willis?
I can out-guilty pleasure him, if that's possible. If you take your eyes down to number 28 in the charts of this week, A Little Boogie Woogie in the back of my mind by Shakin' Stevens. Who doesn't love a little bit of Shakin' Stevens? Yeah, so that I was drawn to that, maybe because I remember it as being utterly dreadful. But, you know, it might have my mind might have mellowed towards that. Number 6, "Labour of Love" by Hue and Cry, which I think is a brilliant song. There's another one that caught my eye. Where was it? Mel and Kim, who have one of the Stock Aitken and I'm sure they were Stock Aitken and Waterman, but they were at the better end, if there is such a thing. And I thought FLM was a really good song. I thought that was a good song. We've got Echo and the Bunnymen in there with "Lips Like Sugar," Black with "The Sweetest Smile," which is a lovely song. But there's a song that's bubbling under at 52, and I got into this group quite late after they kind of peaked. But Squeeze have got "Hourglass" in there, which I think is a brilliant song by a brilliant group.
That's a fine tune, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna put them in with Shaky. Why not?
Okay. Stu, you're safe on Bruce Willis there.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be just me. I've come to terms with that.
Yes, "Lips Like Sugar," Echo and the Bunnymen did need a mention there, absolutely, as well, from my point of view. FLM was a cracking pop song. You're very, very, very correct there. "It's a Sin" by the Pet Shop Boys. The Pet Shop Boys did some absolute bangers throughout the 80s. And I'll throw in my true faith that Stu mentioned as well. Absolutely outstanding. I'll throw my guilty pleasure from this particular chart in as being "Call Me" by Spagna at number 3.
Yes,
I remember that song.
Great shout. That is a great shout. Yeah.
I'm going for that one. Moving on, we've illegally recorded from the charts. We've been to the cinema. We've been destitute teenagers in a London hotel while the parents have all run off to go and watch to Soho and those. A run through the back page headlines of the week leading up to the Football League Rest of the World game. We have it is top heavy on the impending arrival or non-arrival of Diego Maradona for this showpiece game, but other headlines including the Today newspaper withdraws its sponsorship of the Football League for the forthcoming 1987-88 season. A certain owner of the Today newspaper at this point, interestingly, is Rupert Murdoch, who would go on to wreak havoc on football in just a short few years beyond this. But at this point in time, he's distancing himself quite dramatically. Sam Hammam and Dave Bassett throwing mud at each other in the press. A row over his departure to Watford, where we'd have such great success would Dave Bassett in 1987-88. But so the story goes that Dave Bassett he'd wanted an improved contract. Fair enough. He's dragged Wimbledon kicking and screaming all the way up to the First Division. He's kept them there emphatically in 86-87. Reached the FA Cup quarter-finals. Don't think it's particularly beyond the realms of decency to say how about an improved contract, Sam? Hammond's having none of it. Watford come in looking for a new manager to replace Graham Taylor. It's all right, I'm off to Vicarage Road then. An incensed Hammond, who will not give Bassett a pay rise and a new contract. He wants compensation off Watford for nicking his manager. The typical Wimbledon kitchen sink drama going on there in that respect. Don Howe is a very busy week at Plough Lane. Don Howe is unveiled as Bassett's successor. I'm sure he'll do terribly in 1987-88. I'm gonna back my house on that. Mirandina sweeps into Tyneside.
Oh, where's Aidan when we need him? Where's Aidan?
I can hear it. I can hear him singing it. Yeah.
He's on the way to Newcastle, and within this, Yosimar is fancying his chances in English football, and states that he is using Wembley as a shop window for potential move to English football. Mark Wright is in talks for Sheffield Wednesday, although Derby County are looming in the shadows, who might just sneak in to kibosh that transfer. Who knows? Ian Rush as well. He's got off to an absolute flyer in Italy. He scored a hat-trick in a friendly, pre-season friendly against the second string of Juventus players. The fans love him. His new teammates are absolutely delighted. Turing couldn't be happier with him. it's going to be a glorious season ahead for him. And any stories there that stick out for you? I'll go with Chris on first on this one.
I mean, Sam, man, I didn't realise he was actually involved that actively with Wimbledon at that point. But yeah, that was a disaster of a move, wasn't it, to Watford for Dave Bassett? I think Watford looked at it as, we've got one guy who likes a fairly pragmatic football, shall we say, who's gone to Villa. How do we replace him? Well, Dave Bassett's the next cab off the rank for that kind of football. It just didn't work. Dave Bassett very clearly needs a certain kind of environment around him. And I think going from the Sunday League stroke yob culture that he'd built at Wimbledon probably wasn't as well fitting for the slightly more reserved environment at Vicarage Road, shall we say, that Graham Taylor had overseen. So that was a big one. And I was intrigued, Mark Wright, going to possibly Sheffield Wednesday or Derby. What a good career he would go on to have a few years later. And don't do it. Don't go to Sheffield. Go to Derby, Mark. Do yourself a favour.
Okay, controversial view there for Mark Wright's future there, Stu. Southampton, certainly strange, letting go of an England international central defender. Anything else from those headlines?
I think kudos to Chris first of all for his perception of some of these players were looking to put themselves in the shop window. There's no subtlety there, is there, from Josimar? He's just told everyone what he's doing.
He's told exactly.
Well, I'm playing and if anyone wants to buy me, I'm available. Yeah, he might as well have played with a little one of them sandwich boards and for sale written on it. He could have just run around Wembley with one of those on.
Call me.
Yeah, I do love a retrospective transfer story where there's a club that seemed nailed on, and then as a little byline right at the bottom, it would be like, but so-and-so have also shown interest.
Monitoring the situation.
Yeah, and you just think now with hindsight, you're like, you should always check the shadows when you're getting close to a deal, just check who's watching. So yeah, and then obviously, Ian Rush in Turin.
It's got to be a sparkling season for him, Stu.
It's going to be, yeah. I think he's really going to hit the ground running. I think he's going to be a massive success and probably go on to be one of the most successful British exports into Serie A.
Never mind a foreign country. It'll be like playing at home to him, I'm sure. Absolutely will be. Stu, it's been a joy to do the Football League versus Rest of the World module. Thank you so much for your insights and your hands-on Kate Adie come what was his name, Simpson, the one who got hit by the shrapnel. Or was that it was the one that got caught by
Kevin Lloyd, was it? Was it Kevin Lloyd?
Was that there was one of them, wasn't it? He got doing his to camera piece, and then the cameraman manfully just filmed on rather than going over to help him.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for asking me. It was great. I feel it was good. I could bring a slightly different perspective. It was just sad that, unlike Martin Tyler, who got to interview Bobby Robson on the bench during the game, that I wasn't also asked to have such duties and could only report really as a secondary reporter from the fans' perspective. But yes, what a perspective!
Fantastic. And Chris. No Polish players in this game at all. We're outraged.
Absolutely. Where's Boniek?
Where's Boniek? Where is Boniek?
Quite right. Questions must be asked. I having watched this dutifully on TV and from the armchair, I then turned over to watch the Brookside Omnibus and then watched that detailed program about how to maintain your compost afterwards. So
compost.
I think Stu had the better deal here of the two of us.
Channel 4 really groundbreaking though, because they're talking organic compost as well.
Well, there you go. It's the best kind, I find. Best kind. You can't buy that stuff.
And talking all things Channel 4 as well. Interestingly, the following day, Wembley was repurposed for American football. The LA Rams took on the Denver Broncos at a hastily rearranged Wembley. The football post came down, American post went up. The pitch markings were changed, the numbers were planted down. There were 10,000 people more at the American football 24 hours later than there was at Wembley for the Football League Rest of the World game. Absolute Absolutely wild. I mean, 1980, Pete, Channel 4, in the kind of like early pomp, showing the American football on a Sunday and all that type of stuff. It was hugely popular at the time, which, I was amazed. Again, 71,000 compared to the 61,000 that were there for the round ball game the previous day. And I'm sure no booing was taking place. John Elway, boo!
I was going to say John Elway. Yeah, there was no one to rant at, was there? John Elway. Wow,
excellent. But yes, thank you so much. It's been an absolute joy to do this.
Thank you,
and
thank you.
We'll be back on very, very soon. All that leaving to say is spread the word. This has been more nonsense on Your Boys Took Hell of a Beating. Please do join us again next time. Thank you and goodbye.